So yes, I'm Nick Goodrum. I'm from AmericanEagle.com. No, not the clothing company. No, not the airline. Not any of those things. Full service digital agency. And so I oversee the accessibility practice, and is filled with specialists in accessibility, certified, et cetera, right? And really, I want to talk today because I have had to have lots of conversations over the years with many different clients, many that don't even know what accessibility is. And if I want to quiz people, how many people actually know anything about accessibility? All right, I got a good amount. This is good. All right, I'll quiz you next. We'll just quit all the slides and we'll just quiz you. But no, what I run into is even the ones that are aware of it, they view it a lot of times as red tape because they're focused on the compliance. And they're focused on, I got this checklist, I've got priorities, I've got so much I need to do, and yet I've got yet another thing that I need to accomplish. And it's often losing sight of the bigger picture on how focusing on accessibility actually can give you a great ROI. And so today, I'd like to focus on a bit about how accessibility supercharges digital growth. So I lied when I said it was beyond compliance because we're going to talk about compliance first. Sorry, you can't really talk about this subject without talking about compliance. So we're not at the beyond yet. And that's because there's a lot of legal action and changes, and it's been growing. So the government compliance regulations have been growing in the past couple of years. And all of them, because there's even stuff here in Colorado, there's state laws, there's all types of things that have requirements for accessibility. But they all kind of boil down to don't create bias towards people with disabilities, right? That's really kind of all boiled down to that. And so what is disability? What is this, right? And so first question to everyone, right? Who uses assistive technology on a daily basis? And we got one person raising their hand. This was not a call out. This is not like, yeah, what's wrong with you? No, it's everyone uses this, right? So I'll reframe this question. How many of you are wearing contacts or glasses? Oh, look, a lot of assistive technology users. But we take that as normality. 300, 400, well, I'm trying to think about when glasses first started existing. If you had low vision, just have fun with life, right? Because the world wasn't catered to you. Disabilities today are really just things we haven't figured out or accounted for, right? And so if you account for accessibility, you're actually making an experience better for everyone and actually making it a normal day-to-day because the web can be really an accessible space. So I'll talk about a couple of them, right? These are just some, right? Americans with Disabilities Act, right? That's been around for some time. It's about the physicality of things, but it also applies to the web. The most recent change in the past year was Title II. So there's 3 titles for ADA. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them. But Title II is for state and local governments. And so this is actually going to influence a lot of companies' bottom line because state and local governments and higher education, you name it, they all need to account for accessibility. Now they actually have a technical requirement, WCAG 2.1 AA. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's been around since the 90s. So it's not new, it's just been growing and improving over time. And with that, now we have a technical guide. And now you've got state and local governments requiring this. And so I see it. If you've got an LMS that's being sold to some state government, if you are building a platform that's going to be marketed that's for around utilities, like they all need this now. So I'm seeing actually a scramble in the industry as a whole because they need to actually account for this, for accounting for the people that the laws apply to. Now, Title III has been around for a while, and that's public accommodations. And that kind of fits in everything else. So if you see Target, you see Netflix, they've all had lawsuits. This is in the civil space. So generally there's about 4,000 some lawsuits every year around accessibility and in the digital space. Now, this is not just in the US, right? So we also have Canada, for example, AODA, that's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. They were supposed to actually have everything accessible by January of this year. They may not have quite hit their timelines, but they themselves also have introduced fines. It's government-based, so it could be corporations that aren't following these practices could get up to $100,000 a day for things that are not being resolved. But the biggest name is EAA. and that came out and came into enforcement June of this year. And that's going to be like the GDPR from privacy, but now for the accessibility space. Because this applies to the EU, but anyone that actually sells to the EU. So this actually has implications on an international basis. And now again, some of these, like each country takes care of their own, okay, here's our guidelines. And well, the guideline itself is still WCAG, WCAG, WCAG. So everything so far is WCAG. But what the fines are, how much the extent and whatnot. But to give you an example, right, Ireland's EAA has fines up to like 60,000 euros. And for leadership, they put in a clause that says they could get up to 18 years of jail time. Now, is that like, oh, I forgot to put in one input label that I'm somehow going to get thrown in jail? No, I don't think that's why they have these in the books. It's really for like egregious lying and, you know, a menace to society, right? So don't expect everyone to just suddenly be in jail. But yeah, that's why focusing on accessibility, especially if your brand is trying to reach a broader audience, the international scale is important. But so that's compliance. Again, we're thinking of just, okay, yeah, like I got this checklist, I need to do this, right? But let's focus on how accessibility actually gives you a wider reach. So first things first, right? Like we even showed here, how many people, there was like a good majority had glasses and whatnot. But actually, this census data from just the US, right, for Centers for Disease Control says latest data shows up to 1 in 4 people have a disability. And that's just people who align and actually believe they have a disability. If you noticed, a lot of people here actually didn't think they were using assistive technology. They're just normal day-to-day citizens, right? And then everyone goes like, well, if you got a disability, you must be not working or anything along those lines. But actually, the American Institute for Research showed that really the total after-tax disposable income for working age people with disabilities is $490 billion. It's a bit of a market. So ask yourselves, right, if you're trying to sell a product and you're like, oh, but I got to get another $100 from every single one of our existing user base versus saying maybe I could get $1 from millions of additional customers. And that's why some people have even done data analysis. So Nucleus Research said that pretty much sites could be losing an estimated $6.9 billion a year from accessible competitors. Because have you ever been to a website and you're on like a product detail page and you're like, oh, I want to buy something, okay, and the servers are down. You can't hit buy. Do you sit around? Do you go and tell them about it? Or you just leave and go find the next site that will do that for them, right? And then a reminder, the web is actually a very accessible place when done correctly. It's much more accessible than the physical space. And so that's why, if you actually see the data here from the Pew Research Center, 72% of Americans with disabilities shop online compared to people without disabilities, that's only 66%. Now that data changes over time, but it still shows that it's just because the web's a more accessible space, that market is actually it's a more captive market for you. And kind of trying to captivate and increase that, you've got to think now again your SEO. And actually it's not just me, SEO specialists even say like, yeah, you should be actually focusing on accessibility on a couple key areas, right? Because I'm not sure if anyone's interacted with a screen reader before. It's actually a software that allows people with low vision, all types of people with dyslexia, to announce what's on the screen. And how does it do that? Well, it analyzes the headings, the semantics, the links, the structures, all of that, right? And then tells you what it is. What is Google doing when it's trying to figure out the content of your site? It's looking at the links, the headings, the semantics, the structures. So win-win in that aspect, right? And that's where image alt text, right? It helps those search engines find your content, and again, those screen readers. Unique page titles, right? I see plenty of sites that still don't have unique ones, right? Or anchor text, the amount of learn mores and click heres that are super helpful if you have all the other context nearby, versus if a robot was easily figuring out, oh, this goes to this destination, you'd actually get faster conversions, and everyone would actually convert faster. So that's why there's even been some data around this with SEMrush, right? They saw on the ones that they've analyzed, organic search traffic actually increased up to 12% on sites that focused on accessibility. Now, If you already have really good accessibility in place, don't expect to suddenly shoot up, right? Because you've already done the hard work. But if your site's in a really poor shape, you can see where it could actually create some potential growth. And it's a reminder, right? I'll do another one. How many times has anyone ever used a ramp at the front of a building to go into a building? Okay, only a couple people, like the ones you can go instead of taking the stairs to go up to an entrance, right? And so those were actually for people in wheelchairs. It's for physical disabilities. They used to be in the back, and that was because for deliveries, right? And then they moved them to the front for disabilities. And then people with strollers use them. People who just don't want to take stairs use them, right? And so everyone gets benefit by adding accessibility in. And so CTAs, right? High contrast, people always love, like, everyone goes Apple and things like that. They had if you remember Web 2.0 and some of the earlier phases, it was 10-point font and low contrast, and it was super design and fancy, but no one could read it or know what to do with it, right? And so if you look at most design today, it's large text, it's easier to find areas, higher contrast aspects, right? And that works with accessibility because everyone has different levels of vision, and then also some people are just on bad monitors, so it actually helps everyone, right? And so that's why universal accessible design is going to give you a better interface. So examples, right? So legal in general, right? When they did some accessibility updates, it also didn't just improve the user interface, but also improved page speed because they simplified, they made it easier to use, and in the process got rid of a lot of bloat. And so then they also saw a 70% decrease in time, but then also improved feedback. And a reminder, like I said earlier, right? Are people going to tell you that you have a problem? And that's why 71% of people with disabilities have just abandoned a website. And you go, oh, okay, well, I'm just selling golf clubs, so why do I care? And it's well, are you saying someone blind can't buy golf clubs for someone else? Are you saying that a friend who has someone that's disabled wouldn't be kind of not really liking this brand, and thus your brand is hurting in the process, right? And you're not going to hear about it, right? Because they're just going to leave your site. So hopefully that helps change a little bit of minds, or at least give you a little bit of ammunition, because I know you're not the only decision maker in your organization. But how do we actually incorporate this, right? So not just saying, hey, you got to account for this. Let's talk about some of the things that you can do in the marketing space. So the first one is email, the stuff that's still in 1999 technology. So alt text, alternative text for your images. If you're not doing it, there's many reasons you should be. And so one of those, right, is to account for screen readers, right? Account for the end users. But it's also spam filters, actually, believe it or not, right? So on server side, they use image recognition. And emails with no alt text, it might be more likely to be flagged as spam. And known entities that use this, right? So it's got Siren, you've got Spam Titan, you've got Google, Mimecast, they all do this. So you don't want to leave your customers unread. And think of it this way, is alt text ensures meaning is not lost. So there's two on this screen here, there's two images, right? And one of them is 6 boxes of saying, hey, it's 15% off of this product, but blank images, right? Because you don't have any alt text. What am I buying? What am I interested in, right? Because both Outlook and Gmail Mobile and other ones as well, they have images disabled by default. So do you turn on images on every single, email that you get? No. And compare that to the Black Friday deal for Oculus Quest, right? They actually have text inside of there that you can actually read, right? Here's the product. Here's the bundle that they're selling, right? And so that helps both screen readers and people who may not get your imagery. All right, next area might be then the social media space, right? So you can, again, reach a wider demographic by focusing on A11Y. What is A11Y? It's accessibility. There's 11 letters between A and Y. It is a numeronym. There's other ones like internationalization is I18N. It's developers who like to shorten things. It's just how they work. All right, so social network platforms. Kind of think the traditional ones, right? Facebook, LinkedIn, X, right? My general note would be try and avoid large images of nothing but text. Sometimes you see this where it's like text, 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 100 different things about it, all crammed inside of an image. How easy is that to read? Then next, how easy is that to add alt text to that, to describe all of this information, right? So try and avoid huge, large amounts of text in your images. And then next, color contrast. So if people can't read it, right, if it's white on a light peach and no one can read it, you've lost your brand message. And of course, include your alt text. All the platforms do allow you to do that. But I also note important information should be in the description, right? You usually have caption areas. Put that important information in there as well, rather than just assuming everything is inside that image. And I think it's a good example. ASCII art, right, where it's all these lines. Domino's did it, for example, and they had this, I'm just going to take your opinions about pineapple and put them in the garbage. But they did it with a whole bunch of lines, backspaces, or like backslashes, carets, all types of things. How do you think that's going to read to a screen reader? I can tell you this much. It is incoherent. So there's a lost message in that process, right? Oops, there we go. So next is short form media, right? That's getting more popularity, right? You're going to have Instagram, TikTok. You can also put alt text in there. So the platforms, you are limited by your platform. So I understand it's a balance game because you can only do so much because you're stuck within those ecosystems, right? So, but you can. They all have them in there that you can add that alt text. Adding captions, right? So make sure there's captions for anything that's spoken. That way, again, most users are not just blasting it on their phones. They're just reading it. So they're just doing that quietly anyways. But if you do have captions that are text-based only, so nothing that's being narrated, right? Make sure to use those caption stickers. Make sure to use text-to-speech so those text announcements actually come through. And TikTok does actually have algorithmic checks for photosensitivity for flashing lights, right? So if I know everyone wants to post all their rave scenes, try and keep that to a minimum because that can cause for a certain percentage of individuals seizures, right? So Instagram doesn't really do that as much. So if you can put inside your video content, if you know that you got flashing lights, is to add an epilepsy warning at the beginning. If you put it in your captions, why would they be able to read your captions before they see the video, right? So put in that warning, people will appreciate it. All right, what are some other ones? What are some other commonly overlooked marketing gains from accessibility, right? AI. No presentation could be complete without me mentioning AI, right? But it's AI, it should be a co-pilot, right? But I know most people are dealing with, most companies are dealing, we've got thousands of images and products and all of this stuff. How are we going to create alt text for every single one of them? And so we've worked with many clients in creating these kind of prompt engineering to give you context messaging, accounting for like your branding, your SEO, all of these things all combined. Because I'll give you an example. We didn't do this one. This was just an exercise for myself, right? And so this is actually a real product, right? And it's a gardener's harvest basket. I'm not here to sell it for you. If you want to go, you can go find it online. The alt text for this is gardener's harvest basket. Great. There's 5 other images on this page, all showing on counters and all types of different positionings. If you got 5 images that all say gardener's harvest basket, what's that experience for someone that you just close your eyes, just gardener's harvest basket? What does that send a message? Does that tell you anything? Does it give you any of the emotional response here, right? So general AI without context, just putting into ChatGPT. They've gotten better at it, right? It says person carrying a wooden and wire mesh garden harvest basket filled with vegetables and flowers in a forest setting. That's not bad, right? But it doesn't really put the product name in anymore, so that might be a lost opportunity. So it's like, okay, well, hey, ChatGPT, go analyze this page and then give me alt text for this image. And then it said, hey, gardener's harvest basket, mesh and wood produce basket for gardening and rinsing. Great, sweet. Can you do that for 5 more? Can you do that for 5 others? There's context loss, there's emotion loss, there's marketing lost, right? So that's why you have to then work together to say, like, what other branding, what other messaging, how can I make this unique? So A gardener carrying the gardener's harvest basket, crafted with pine wood and durable wire mesh, filled with freshly pickled vegetables, or picked, not pickled, that would be weird, and flowers for rinsing outdoors. So it gives feature, branding, message, experience, and uniqueness. Documents. How many sites are still using PDFs? Because I'm here just to shame you. I apologize. It's fine. No, you don't have to raise your hands. It's okay. You can keep it secret. But unfortunately, they're out there. And really, PDFs, it's this kind of idea of like, everything is paper, so then we need everything printable, and we fall into this, let's use PDFs for everything. But then most of them aren't tagged correctly, don't have language settings, don't have any of the setup that would actually be crawlable. They're scanned images of documents that don't have any alt text, and of course then are pretty worthless from an SEO standpoint. So my first note is, consider if PDFs are the right choice. I did data entry for a side job in college, and I can tell you, taking people's pieces of paper and putting it into a database, and someone paying me for it is a really highly inefficient system when they could have just filled out a form online and had that all submitted. Determine how they're made. Most marketing teams and whatnot might use InDesign or something like that. There's ways of actually in InDesign to do it correctly. And so we've trained clients and said like, okay, yeah, let's put in the proper setup so that you can export accessible PDFs. AI. I can tell you, at least from Acrobat and most of the other tools I see, it's still shooting out a lot of garbage. It's really not any more accessible. Like some parts, if it's really not that complex, it does an okay job, but anything complex like tables or anything like that, it starts to fall apart. And like I said, avoid scanned images whenever possible. All right, so dedicated media pages. I think, again, how many are actually putting video on a regular basis on your website? Okay, we got a couple, right? And it's a growing trend, more and more of everyone's consuming from the video space, right? And so it's a missed opportunity from SEO if all you do is add a YouTube, because you probably upload it to YouTube, you probably add it to Vimeo. If you make all of your money from ads, ads from YouTube or something along those lines, okay, maybe there's some value there. But most of the time, I see people that end up putting it just on their website as an embed. Okay, that embed is not going to be crawled by Google. It's not going to give any information on what's going to actually happen or what's the actual content, right? So if you can create a dedicated page for it, now I'll get into the requirements from WCAG, right? So every video needs closed captions for the deaf and for people with noisy kids or people in a cafe. You need descriptive transcripts. And when I say descriptive, it means describe the scenes, describes what it's important, right? Not just the audio, who's talking. And then audio descriptions. So that you're writing a screenplay when you're writing a descriptive transcript, right? That screenplay would be the narrator. That narrator would be recording audio, and that audio would be then put onto a video, right? And so one of those you might have noticed would be beneficial from an SEO perspective, and that is your descriptive transcripts. So having a dedicated video page allows you to put a whole page, because Google's not going to crawl that video, but it will crawl all of that text explaining everything inside that video. And if it's on your site on a dedicated page, great. Now you can direct traffic to that and then create conversions from there. So another thing to consider, right, is background video transcripts, right? Emotional pieces. You might just say like, it's two people shaking hands. Doesn't matter. It's not important. It's like, but then why'd you choose it? Why'd you add it, right? It's a missed marketing opportunity. So a lot of times it's meant to, if you're a university, it's like, here's, everything that you have available. Here's all of the cool things we have. But if you add an information icon, you press that, and there's toggleable information saying like, this is what the video's about. That helps everyone, including sighted users, on what that experience is. So I'll just point out one of those statistics of wins. And This American Life, for example, when they added audio transcripts to their web pages, because it was a podcast, if anyone knows what that is, there was an organic increase in search traffic from up to 6.68%. So you do make a difference. I don't have infinite time, so I can only do so much. So if you want to find out more, there's a QR code up on the screen. You can scan it if you so desire. I'm also here. Feel free and reach out, because I only just scratched the surface and I can talk to no end on this. So I'll leave you with that.